In 2020, when our budget was 840 million, we had 197,000 population. In today, we have 188,000 people. And our budget for this year was 1.236 billion. So somebody explain to me why we're spending over 50% more with less people.
I want to welcome everybody to the newest edition of I'm Just Saying with me, Robbyn Battles. My guest today is Patrick Murphy. And let me tell you something fun about Patrick Murphy. The tagline for this podcast is just get to the point. He's going to laugh because Patrick Murphy has so much to say. He's so intelligent. He's so well-rounded in things he knows about the community, in commercial real estate, in community advocacy. He has a lot to say. So I'm going to let him just roll and talk and chat. And let me introduce Patrick Murphy. And Patrick, tell us a little bit about yourself.
Thank you very much, Robbyn. I appreciate that introduction. And one of the reasons that I do talk a fair amount is I am the youngest of 9 children, and I had to make myself heard. So that's one of the reasons. But there is so much to discuss with the city of Glendale and the amount of changes that have gone on in our city over the last 4 to 6 years that I try to condense it, and I've been successful to a certain degree, but there's a lot of technical issues associated with these pressing issues that sometimes it takes a little bit further or more explanation.
So for those people that do not know you, they should absolutely get to know you because you are other than all the advocacy that you're doing for the community, you're a very kind person. You are a great listener. And what I would love for people to know about you, you are running for a seat on Glendale City Council. That's not the only reason I asked you on. Because you are a local resident, and I always say you're on the upper north side of the Glendale, so you're up in the Foothills. And I've lived here all my life. How long have you lived up here in the Glendale area?
I met my wife in 2012, and she lived at the time at Sycamore Woods, which is across the wash from Whiting Woods. That was 2012. So that's my first experience with Glendale, really. I lived in Burbank for many years and got to know Montrose, got to know the north up here. We married in 2017 and we moved here permanently in 2020. I still had a home in Burbank that I just finished remodeling. And I said, honey, can we live there for a few years? And she said, sure, but I want to come back to La Crescenta. And that was fine. And when we moved back, I fell in love with La Crescenta, Montrose, and this whole northern corridor up here.
So here's what's interesting. And you and I were chatting beforehand. And I said, if you've lived in the Foothills for any length of time, you don't call it Glendale. You call it La Crescenta. You call it La Crescenta Montrose. So when you go to Whiting Woods, they say it's Whiting Woods. And for those that don't know, Whiting Woods is right at Honolulu in Pennsylvania. Sycamore Woods is a little bit further down. There are all these little micro neighborhoods that we say make up the Foothills of La Crescenta Montrose. And I was saying to you yesterday, for a very long time, we haven't had a candidate for city council in the Foothills because a lot of us say we are the stepchild of Glendale and don't get that attention. And it's really refreshing to have someone that understands the lay of the land, the dynamic of the Foothills. It's much different than South Glendale, the other end of North Glendale, the canyon areas. Glendale's very diverse in its terrain, its cultures, its neighborhoods. So it's nice to have a local running for a spot on Glendale City Council. So what's the agenda? What's the platform? What do we need to know from you?
So I'll give you a little history on my involvement with Glendale politics. We received a flyer on our door from the Whiting Woods HOA inviting us to a neighborhood meeting with the community development director to talk about the Verdugo Wash Project. It was in someone's front yard. It was back in 2021, September. And so we went. And there were about 75 people there. They were completely opposed to it. And I spoke. And I have experience, as I mentioned earlier, prior to this, in retail shopping center redevelopment. So in my career, I've taken distressed retail properties and turned them around. For example, like an empty Kmart that I would split up and put different tenants in. I've done medical buildings. I've done preschools. So I've been before planning commissions and city councils throughout my career. So I'm comfortable in that environment. And what happened was the city was not informing the people about this Verdugo Wash Project. So the Whiting Woods president and vice president of the HOA made a decision after that meeting that they wanted to start a coalition. And it's called the Verdugo Wash Neighborhoods Coalition, and the website is savethewash.com. And they called me and said, would you be the spokesperson? And I said, sure. And so I would go to city council meetings, and I was singularly focused at that time. So this was the early 2020s. And all I was concerned about was the wash project. But as I was sitting through these city council meetings, I started to see things that were going on. And I would question and I would get involved. And so as time went by, 22, 23, 24, I got more involved and saw more things that were happening. And then people were encouraging me to run. And I thought long and hard about it. I talked with Janae. We spent a lot of time speaking about it. Janae is my wife.
I was going to say, Janae is the wife. Lovely, lovely wife, by the way.
Thank you, Robbyn. And made the decision last August to jump. Basically, this is my way of giving back. I have no political aspirations to go any further than Glendale. I will not go to Sacramento. I have no interest in going to Washington other than for a little vacation. Love that town. And the county, I'm not looking for a county seat. So I'm only looking to help make Glendale better. In terms of, let's call it the platform, I've never done this before. Okay. So I'm a complete novice at running for office, and I am retiring. It's a transition for me. But they say a platform is made up of planks. Okay. So one of the planks is, I don't think people are very aware of the financial condition of the city. We have an imbalance in our budget. Our budget went from $840 million in 2020 to $1.3 billion in 2024.
Okay.
That's a 55% increase.
That's crazy. So I have 8,000 questions just in that first part.
Okay.
So can I back up for just a second?
Yeah,
sure.
sure.
I won't ask all of them. But I would love for you to point out a couple of things, just some bullets, a couple of things that you were noticing as you started, because most people don't go to city council meetings. Most people don't go online and listen to city council meetings. Most people will see the flyer of something that's going to happen in their community, and then they either love it or they hate it, and they get outraged, and then the rage goes away and they go about their daily life. But you took that different path and you said, wait a second, I'm seeing things. What are some things you were seeing as you sat on those council meetings?
The spending on vanity projects, for example, and I call them vanity projects because I believe that's what they are, and they serve as an ideological narrative. And I'll give you one example: the North Brand Boulevard Bicycle Demonstration Project. This was a project last year that was in the spring. They took away 2 lanes of traffic, one in each direction. They put in 2 bicycle lanes, protected bicycle lanes on either side of the street. They protected them with K-rails because this was a demonstration project, and they had only 1 lane in each direction. They spent $1.8 million on the project.
How many blocks was that project?
It was 0.6 of a mile.
Okay.
So a little more than half, 1/10 of a mile, more than half a mile. It was like, I don't know, 6 or 8 blocks. They went from Mountain down to Glen Oaks. And that project, it was not well thought out. They studied it as it was going. There were more accidents. There were less bicycle riders because the bicyclists were afraid to ride in the bicycle lanes because there were so many driveways into commercial properties, and there were parking stalls that were blocking the visibility of a bicycle rider from the people driving into the driveways, that they were afraid to drive and ride in those lanes. So there was that. And then there was cut-through traffic on the adjoining streets. People in the morning or in the evening, if they're going to use a cut-through scenario, they're not going to do it slowly. And they're driving down these residential streets, and it's not safe. The biggest issue was the fire department has a fire station on the north side of this demonstration project. Fire Chief Fish came out when they were making the decision, the council was making the decision whether to keep the demonstration project and tweak it a bit, make some changes, or remove it. Fire Chief Fish counseled strongly against keeping it. He said that this station experiences on average 36 calls per day, and the response times were slowing down. So this was a life safety issue. It had become a life safety issue. The vote came in to remove it. 4 were to remove, 1 was to keep it. And so it got removed. So that's one example of the vanity spending, vanity project spending, because there was an option. There's an option. There's a street called Louise, which is 2 blocks to the east. It's a residential street with single family and multifamily. Parking is necessary because these apartment buildings don't have enough parking. They're older. Completely residential from Mountain on the north, a straight shot down to Maple in South Glendale. Why not use that street? It wasn't even considered in the bicycle transportation plan. And they've spent millions on the bicycle transportation plan, which is a whole nother scenario. There's over 90 miles of bicycle lanes that are planned in this bicycle
I don't think
transportation
people
plan.
understand. Sorry to interrupt you, but I don't think that people know that there is a whole plan already in place that will go throughout the city of Glendale, which includes the La Crescenta Montrose area. And we're experiencing part of that plan now, which is the removal of lanes, proposed removal of lanes. And I don't even think it's proposed. If everybody that's on there gets reelected, we're going to lose a lane north and south on La Crescenta Avenue.
It's already done. That's done.
That's done. There's no
That's
reversing
done.
that.
Yeah, that's completely done. They're doing the work. They said that they would be done in December of last year. And you see the signs because I drive it almost daily. And then it moved from December to March, and now it's June.
And I'll tell you, just to not be anti, but some improvements that were done to La Crescenta were fabulous. The stop signs, the curbs, the gutters, not stop signs, but the stoplights. There was some nice improvements. But when you take away a lane, and this is what I'm saying, is when you don't live up here and you don't understand the dynamic of one accident on the 210 freeway, and it becomes gridlock up here. If you have, I mean, we've had massive fires up here, and the backup and trying to get home. We used to have a horse, and when they did the bike lane that went at the end of Sunland Boulevard, where you'd go off to Foothill again toward Lakeview Terrace, they eliminated lanes there. And we were at a dead stop. You had people trying to get out from Lakeview Terrace and people trying to get in to get their horses. And they had this bike lane sitting there empty with a patrol car blocking somebody just jumping the little dedicated lane and opening up traffic. There will, at some point in the Verdugos, be a fire. Those hills have not burned for, I can't tell you. I've lived up here for well over 50 years plus. And I can't tell you the last time there was a fire up
The
there.
Whiting Woods, right behind here, the Whiting Woods Hills, approaching 65 years since the last fire.
Yes, that tells you how old I am.
But it's these concerns are falling on deaf ears with most of this current council.
Yes.
And as far as the La Crescenta Avenue, you talk about spending. That project is over $15 million. Now, it's not all bike lanes because they're putting in traffic signals, but they're making improvements that don't make a lot of sense in my view. but they spent $15 million. They're spending $15 million, and it's all from SB1, which is a ballot measure that passed years ago, increased the taxes on gasoline, and each city gets a certain allotment depending upon how much gasoline they sell and how much taxes they collect. And all of the money for this fiscal year from SB1 that came into the city, all of it's going to La Crescenta Avenue. So none of the other streets in the city received any benefit from SB1. That's just wrong. That's not equitable,
No,
and it's wrong.
it's
And that
wrong.
bicycle path is a 1.7 mile bicycle path to nowhere. Now, again, they had other options. Spar Heights is next door. And La Crescenta Avenue comes down and wraps around Spar Heights.
Right. But Rosemont goes straight down.
Why not put a bicycle path on a residential street, keep the parking, make it one way, because if I'm living on a street and it's one way, then the theory is that the traffic is going to be cut in half. And if I have young children, then I'm going to be very happy about traffic being cut in half. So why would you put it on a major corridor? And back to the bicycle transportation plan that they spent a lot of money with consultants on. They are suggesting, and now it's not adopted yet, okay? It's over 90 miles of bicycle paths, the large majority of them protected, separated. One of the people running for council formed a group called Walk Bike Glendale. And he was serving on the Sustainability Commission. And this is, I think I'm going back to 23. They had a hearing about the bicycle transportation plan. And he said, I strongly insist on putting Glendale Avenue back into the plan for protected bike lanes.
Could you imagine that?
Yeah. So think about something. Our third highest category of revenue in the city is sales tax revenue. The amount of retail south of the freeway on Glendale Avenue is enormous. So imagine removing traffic lanes, putting in protected bike lanes on that street, and the amount of congestion that would be generated there, and how quickly would we lose customers, and as a result, lose sales tax revenue, and we go into a bigger hole on our deficit. We ran a $34 million deficit this year. They knocked it down to $4 million. But we're at a deficit now.
What is the biggest expenditure for the city of Glendale?
It's salaries. And it's the largest part of the salaries is police department and fire department. Now that's public safety. That's very important. But I want to use an analogy. Huntington Beach has 200,000 people. They have 32 square miles. And they have approximately the same amount of retail that we do, 8.5 million feet, I think it is. It's not as concentrated as ours. We have 2.2 million square feet across the street from one another, the Americana and the Galleria. They are spending $500 million. Their total budget is $500 million. They don't have a power company. So we spend a lot of money on the power company. However, the power company is a net positive, because it funds the general fund. This year it was $30 million. It has transfer payments to other departments. So it's actually a net positive. Huntington Beach has to buy their power. So we have a net positive, but they have the same amount of retail. They have the same amount of mileage, and they have the same amount of people, actually a little more people. Why is their budget less than half of ours? Especially given that in 2020, when our budget was $840 million, we had 197,000 population. Today, we have 188,000 people. And our budget for this year was $1.236 billion. So somebody explain to me why we're spending over 50% more with less people. One of the things in my experience with real estate, retail real estate, for 5 years, I worked as the vice president of real estate for Leslie's Swimming Pool Supplies. And I opened up 250 stores for them across the country. And I used when I was making a decision as to which location to choose in a particular market, I would analog it, this new location, with other stores that were similar to it so that I could peg a revenue number so I could see how much rent we could pay, right? So I would put together the pro forma and I'd sit down with the CEO. It was basically a committee of two. We would bring in the operations team. We would bring in merchandising and marketing and consult with them. But I would analog it. I want to take that same model as it relates to our budget. I want to take that same model and I want to analog our city with other cities that are successful with respect to their budgeting. And I want to dig in. I want to dig in deep. I want to show you something. So this is the adopted budget for the current fiscal year.
Does anybody read that entire thing that's on city council?
But no,
Who actually, this is what I always thought. And I don't want to be pegged as that's Robbyn Battles, that conspiracy theorist. That's not what I am. I'm very logical. And my worst thing is I hate hypocrisy. If you're going to show me a binder that, what is that? Probably 4 or 5 inches thick, something like that.
Combined with the financial statement. So this is the total. So yeah, it's about 4 inches.
So if you're sitting on that city council and you're making decisions, you have staff behind you that wasn't elected, that I'm going to assume at some point throughout reading that have some bias agenda of their own that feeds into the people sitting on city council. And if city council hasn't read it and staff just cherry picks it, there's got to be millions of dollars of waste in there somewhere. And you can't just say it's fire and police all the time because no one wants to cut the police. No one wants to cut fire. And then isn't the fire department going for an additional tax coming on the November ballot, I think, because they need more money?
Now they are proposing a parcel tax, and it came up a couple of weeks ago. It came up at council for the finance department brought revenue generating ideas to council. One of them was a sales tax. Another was a vacancy tax. Another was a parcel tax. And the parcel tax, they did not have any estimates of what the need was for the public safety parcel tax. What is the need? And they didn't have any estimate of what the costs were, of what it would generate, the parcel tax. So they didn't present need and they didn't present prospective revenue. So how can you make a decision when you don't have the information? Now, the fire department, people that I'm talking to, there is a threat. I shouldn't say threat. There is an issue with the fire department, but I'd have to dig into it with them. What I can tell you is, one of the things you say, what are they spending it on? This year, this adopted budget called for a 28% increase in overtime.
Why do they need a 28% increase in overtime?
Exactly.
Do we not have enough firemen? Do we not have enough police?
No, police. So I did a ride along with Sergeant Davis, and I went, spent half a day with him. And then I went to the Arctic, which is Real-Time Intelligence Center, which is a fantastic technology that they've instituted in the police department. They have the Project 300, which is 300 sworn police officers, and they're approaching being successful with that. Chief Sid did a great job with bringing staff on, bringing sworn officers on. And what they did, there were a lot of lateral moves. So these police officers were from other departments. So that saved a lot of money in terms of training. So the police department staffed up. Fire department, different story from what I'm getting from Chief Brooks and some of the battalion chief. Because I talk to these people and I spend time with them. And if I get elected, I'm going to dig in. And Chief Brooks loves Glendale. He was on the audit committee meeting last month, which meets, and I'll get into that in a moment. He came to the internal audit department and said to them, I want you to audit the fire department. Now, how rare is that?
Okay. Yeah, but it makes sense. Don't be afraid to see, because you might see that there's something that's repetitive. You might see that there's money being spent that that doesn't mean anything about safety, where he could improve equipment or add firemen. There's so many directions that could go. And if you don't start auditing, having clean, clear audits, how do you ever get rid of waste? Because I think we're at a turning point in just about every community where how many more taxes can you put on us? You're
Right.
raising sales tax. And if people don't know what a personal tax is, that's where they add it to property owners. So you don't want rents going up, but you keep voting for these personal taxes. You can't ask for less and expect to tax other people more and not
That's
have
why we
costs
need
for less.
efficiencies.
Pardon me?
We need efficiencies. So in the
100%.
the audit committee meets once a quarter. Every other committee and commission that I know of, like sustainability, the charter review committee, the transportation and parking commission, all of these bodies meet once a month. Arguably, the audit committee, if it is not the most important, it's in the top 2 or 3. It's meeting once a quarter and they have no teeth. They can't tell the department what to audit or what not to audit. There have been over 90 contracts in the last 3 years that the city signed that were over $1 million. There were only 3 that were audited. 3. That's wrong.
How do you not audit and approve every contract to spend our money to do your projects? I find that's interesting. It's enlightening to know that. But I don't think, like, I didn't know that. I didn't know they met every quarter. You just figure that if you're spending money, you're looking at where this money's coming from and do we have the money? And nobody has any money.
And
Well,
they're all saying we need more resources. Robbyn, when I look at this, okay, and when I dig, I find more and more. And when I talk to people in staff, I hear more. And it's what is going on here? We are chasing our tail now and we're going into deficit. And that's wrong. That's absolutely wrong. We shouldn't be doing this. And like I said, 197,000 people in 2020, 188 today. We're spending over 50% more money. Somebody tell me why.
So here's a couple hot button topics. We're just gonna talk about City of Glendale the whole time. We'll do a follow-up, okay? But I think this is so important because there's so many things going on, hitting
Right.
all of us at the same time. So there's SB 79, there's the BRT. Most people don't know what BRT is. BRT cost a sale the other day because I told a client, I said, do not buy that property. And look at that's just blunt honesty. And they said, why? And it was a property that was directly across the street from the DMV down in Glendale. You're going to raise your 2-year-old across this, not that it's across from the DMV. I thought, I mean, that's not bad. I said on the weekends it's closed. You don't have a lot of traffic. That's good. But if you look overhead at the DMV, if they ever sold that ginormous parking lot, and you know where I'm going with parking lots in a
I
sense.
drove past it the other day.
And I'm like, you've got
Huge parcel.
It's huge. It's huge. And the DMV is so much of it's going online. I wouldn't be surprised if the city of Glendale isn't already negotiating behind closed doors to get them to sell that parcel. I wouldn't be surprised. But I don't think people understand BRT and the effect that SB 79 will have. We're starting to hear tinges of it. Density housing up in the foothills. There are between La Cañada and Sunland Tahunga, if you just drive Foothill Boulevard, there are over 498 units proposed in the pipeline to be built.
I did not know that.
498 units. Oh yeah.
That's huge.
It's huge. And that does not include the Cherry, I think I'm going to say this wrong. I'm going to say Cherry Canyon, and I don't know that's right. It's Latuna Canyon. They have another 600 homes they're trying to build in Latuna Canyon, right at the 210, just not the golf course. This is going to flank each side of the 210 freeway. And if you've ever been on Latuna Canyon going to get on to Lowell Avenue, that thing, because Caltrans now
drive it all the time.
But the light's been turned on for people to get on the freeway at Lowell when you enter off of Honolulu. The traffic backs up. It'll back up all the way to Latuna Canyon, up to Hunga Canyon, Little Tonga Canyon, up to Foothills. So that doesn't include those 600 homes there. And these are all density bonus projects. There's a huge one right now that's in the center of controversy. That's at the corner of New York and Foothill.
Right.
And that's right down the street from Clark Magnet. So you've got school buses and residents. And the city of Glendale, I know that they have limited power over these SB7, or that's not even SB79.
Can I explain BRT and SB79?
Yeah, let's do BRT and then SB79 and Montrose parking lots.
Okay.
Okay,
so I'm relatively fluent in all of these areas. I attended a meeting last Monday, not the other day, but the Monday before, at Fremont Park, and I spent a considerable amount of time. The meeting was from Metro to discuss BRT with the community. They had easels up, and they had staff members from Metro there. I spent a considerable amount of time speaking with project manager. SB 79 in conjunction with the BRT is an absolute existential threat to our city, through the entire city.
But explain why and break it. So the average person that just rents a house and base it off my DMV conversation we just had.
Yes.
Why is that an existential?
So let me explain the BRT line.
Okay.
It runs from border of Burbank at Alameda and Glen Oaks, comes over to Central. It's a dedicated bus lane on that run. It turns south on Central. It's a mixed-use lane that goes to the freeway. And then from the freeway south to Broadway, it's a dedicated lane, bus lane. And then on Broadway going east into Eagle Rock, it's a dedicated bus lane. Wherever there is a bus on this BRT dedicated bus lane, SB 79 kicks in. Within 95 feet, they can build 9 stories. Within a quarter mile, they can build 7 stories, taking out single-family residential zoning. Within a half a mile, they can go 5 stories, all with no parking requirement. All of it.
So just so
plus density bonuses.
So just so people know, when you're going across Glen Oaks Boulevard and you see the DMV there on Glen Oaks Boulevard, now you hit Central. And now just imagine you're getting off the freeway, the 134 in either direction, to go either direction on Central. It's already a nightmare. So now they're going to congest that more. And then when you get down to Central and Broadway, that's the Galleria. And that's going to cut across Brand where the Americana starts. And it's going to continue all the way across. So you're going to eliminate a lane that gives access to the Glendale Galleria, that gives access to Americana, all for a bus lane. I'm shocked they haven't thrown in a dedicated bike lane, and they just haven't blocked off the streets.
That's coming
in their entirety.
That's coming too. And here's the political side of this. They put on the agenda last Tuesday afternoon, which they do a lot.
They do a lot of afternoons when no one can go.
Right. I was there. They were discussing whether to send Metro a letter insisting on a supplemental environmental impact review due to SB 79. Now, the environmental was done years ago, and Burbank they sent a letter. They were insisting on a supplemental EIR. The item that they were discussing was whether to agendize the discussion to send a letter. So it's like, we agreed to talk, which is silly. You just throw it on the agenda. One very critical component of this discussion last Tuesday, they recused out Vartan Garpetian and they recused out Artie Kasakian. Vartan, because he has an office on Broadway and he has a potential conflict risk. One of his clients owns property on Central. And Mr. Kasakian lives in Pelinconi, close to Glen Oaks Boulevard.
Okay, can I just
However,
and ask you? Because I think I don't know if this is where you're going, but But isn't one of the city council members on the Metro board?
Yes. So Mr. Najarian, who is our mayor, is the longest serving board member on Metro. And he is a big proponent of this project, a huge proponent.
Yeah.
Glendale, for all the cities, North Hollywood, part of LA, across Burbank, through Glendale, Eagle Rock, we have the most bus stops and we have the most dedicated bus lanes. But he did that without realizing that SB 79 was going to come. But he's still not pushing Metro to recuse these two. And this is a technical aspect. The Fair Political Practices Commission in California, FPPC, governs the behavior and recusals of elected officials. There is a provision in these guidelines, in these regulations, that says the public generally is affected by a particular project, and you don't have to recuse anybody. Generally is defined as 25% of the population. Well, this is going to affect more than 25% of the population.
100%.
Right. So that's one issue. Let's put that aside for a moment. So the discussion, as they were deliberating, talking about whether to talk about it.
They're doing a lot of talk about, just to get,
Yeah.
when did they do that on? Just to get the Montrose parking lots on the agenda?
Yes, the CORO.
CORO,
So
yeah.
the two of the incumbents that are running for re-election who were not recused, one of them said Burbank got their answer and Metro sent a letter back saying, we don't have to do another EIR. And this incumbent said, if they already got the answer and we know the answer, then there's no reason to send a letter. However, in my book, you complain. You let them know that we are on record saying, this is a problem for us. It's an existential threat. We need a new EIR. Now, let me go further on. My conversation with the project manager, he told me that Burbank sent a letter. This is the Monday before the Tuesday meeting. And he said Burbank sent a letter and they responded, Metro responded with, it wasn't necessary. And I said, who made that determination? And what he told me was our internal environmental attorneys. And I said, isn't that like the fox guarding the henhouse? How can you possibly make that determination? So really what has to happen here, Robert, is, in my view, a CEQA challenge, California Environmental Quality Act challenge, Burbank and Glendale, but Glendale's not going to do it. So we need the residents who I'm talking to institute a challenge and action against Metro, a CEQA action to stop this, to stop it and to study it some more, because it is an existential threat. It'll crush neighborhoods.
So just to make it a little bit more, so people, because in my business, I hear all the residents. I hear what they're saying about, and it's always, you always get the comment, you're just a NIMBY. This is not about being NIMBY. This is not saying that we don't want some more housing built, even though your population is going down, because reports and studies are showing that all of this density housing that's being built is not bringing down the cost of rent.
No.
You're destroying neighborhood. Everybody wants to live in these great neighborhoods, but you're destroying all of these great neighborhoods. And they did density bonus, if the background of density bonus and why we are at this point was because land is still too expensive. They couldn't get developers to build just regular 2 and 3 story units. And so the state started saying, what if we gave you incentives? What if we gave you incentives? More and more incentives. Hence, now you have no parking restrictions. And I think that our former Glendale City Council member, she was instrumental in getting the parking reduction part of the bill passed. And you've got more and more. You've got, is it Senator Wiener that's up there? Scott Wiener, yeah, there's a couple of them. But Scott Wiener is SB 79 all the way. It was poorly written. It's being rushed through to make corrections to it. So you've got neighborhoods that will literally, Kenneth Village, all the way up to Kenneth Road, down to Glen Oaks, you can build apartment buildings all the way up. You're not going to have, unless you live up in the hills. And it's interesting that the neighborhoods that won't be touched by density bonus and SB 79 tend to be where our electeds live. And they're very rarely affected by these things. But if you're now saying, hey, I used to be able to walk the street and bike, you will not be able to, because you're going to have so much dense population. That's where you're saying this existential threat is coming from. And then you talk about power and water and
Police,
infrastructure.
fire.
Yeah. There's
So let me give you some context.
okay.
The land use element, and we'll move into the parking lots now.
Yes.
Okay, because you want to discuss that. So the land use element is in a draft form right now. It's going through an environmental review. It's a 20-year plan. It's an element that sits inside the general plan. So the general plan is the Bible, and let's call the land use element the book of Genesis. And within this plan, you talk about population increase. Within this land use element, they're calling for an additional 96,000 housing units. This is over 20 years, 96,000 housing units with a population increase of over 260,000, taking our population to approximately 450,000. Let me give you some context. Today, the city of Los Angeles has 3.9 million people. They have 420 plus square miles in their city. That's an average of 8,300 people per mile. If we went to the 450,000, we have 31 square miles in our city. That would increase our population to over 14,500 people per square mile. So we would be almost
astronomical.
double. We would be almost double. Now, you know what I'm not factoring in there? Within that 31 square miles, lots of hillside up here. So I'm not even breaking it down to how much flat land we have to be able to build these units. So this land use element has this projection, and they'll say that's just a plan. It's probably not going to happen. If it's not going to happen, why do you have it in the land use?
But if it's not going to happen, why aren't you doing things to? If it's not going to happen, you're not doing anything to stop this development. You can't stop the density bonus. That's mandated by the state. That's a one size fits all. You're going to take it and you're going to like, and perhaps that will change over the next.
We
couple
need to
of years.
challenge that.
What's that?
We need to challenge the
But
state.
here's the thing: the city of La Cañada challenged it, and look what happened to them.
They didn't. What they didn't do. They didn't certify their housing element. Okay, that's a different ballgame.
But now they're gun shy about denying anything. And
You're
I
right.
think, but so correct me if I'm wrong. So is the city of Glendale in such financial straits that they don't want to fight this because they feel this will bring more income into the city and save the city financially? Is that how they're looking at it?
I have heard from the dais that we have the structural budget issues. These structural budget issues have happened over the last 4 to 6 years, as I've talked about. And I've heard one of the incumbents say, I'm just the messenger. You are not just the messenger, you're the policymaker. And I believe, yes, that they want this increased density to increase revenue. However, I believe it's a net loss. For example, the CORO inside this land use element. For people who don't know, it's an acronym, CORO. It's the city-owned residential overlay. And it's taking what I'm calling public-owned parking lots and upzoning them for multifamily high-density residential. And they want to land lease or sell these parcels to reduce our budget issues. It's not going to move the needle. It's not. And it's going to take years to do it. We don't have years. And it's going to reduce sales tax revenue in Montrose, because if you take away the parking.
So for people that don't know, because some people don't know, if you've gone to Montrose Shopping Park, and I mean, if you haven't been to Montrose Shopping Park, first of all, you should go to Montrose Shopping Park. Montrose is this charming few blocks. I grew up in Montrose, so it's very near and dear to my heart. And it's changed over the years. And I don't think it's been bad changes, but you have all these great mom and pop shops in Montrose. And their parking are the big lots behind, which if you go on any given day at this point, because there's more restaurants now, because there's more shops moving in, those parking lots that used to sit mildly full until the weekend are almost full every single night.
You're
And
right.
now starting midday, they're starting to fill up. So they're necessary for these merchants.
They absolutely are. And the merchants are absolutely opposed to taking that public owned parking lot and putting multifamily high density residential there. And the problem is, so there's an inverse consequence to this. An inverse consequence means the opposite occurs from what planning. So the inverse consequence is if you take away the parking lots in Montrose and put residential on them, you're going to lose sales tax revenue. And as I had mentioned earlier, related to Glendale Avenue, if you lose sales tax revenue, then we're going to be in a bigger budget hole. So that's one issue where the people in Montrose, and as I was canvassing in Spar Heights and getting to know people in Spar Heights, they are very concerned about losing those parking lots because if they do, people will come into their neighborhood and park, and they'll be driving through their neighborhoods. There's a lot of young children in Spar Heights. So that's an issue for the people in Spar Heights. And you go down to the Verdugo corridor and Cañada. So across Verdugo Park, you have the Babe Herman little baseball field, the little league field, and you have a parking lot next to that. You have a parking lot fairly good size next to the Civic Auditorium and one next to St. Gregory's at Mountain and Verdugo. They want to take those parking lots and they want to build high density multifamily. And the neighborhoods behind them, Ross Moyne Mountain HOA and Royal Canyon HOA, do not want it. And the Civic Auditorium, that's another scenario. It's an underutilized asset, but that's another scenario. I won't get into that. But so here's one of my planks in my platform is public outreach. We're not talking to our community. We're not informing our community, and we're not engaging with our community. In December of 2024, I attended a meeting. It was called a scoping meeting for this land use element. There were more consultants and staff members than there were members of the public there. There were 4 members of the public there. It was December the 9th, so right in the middle of the holidays. And they wanted to hear from the public as to what the scope of work should be in this land use element. This land use element is 280 pages long. You have to inform and educate the people what this means. They didn't do that. In July of 2025, they came to council with a draft land use element. And that draft land use element had the CORO in it. And at that meeting, there were 2 people in the audience and 3 callers. So over 2 meetings, there were a total of 9 for a document that is a 20-year plan that's going to increase our population to over 450,000 people. So I saw what was going on, and I got with MSPA like you did.
The Montrose
Okay, you
Shopping
were
Park
very,
Association.
you were extremely instrumental, Robbyn, and I greatly appreciate your efforts with this.
Why? What
So,
did I do?
well, you let people know about the town hall. You let
Yeah.
people know what was going on.
Yeah.
And so we put together a town hall, MSPA, Royal Canyon HOA, Ross Moyne Mountain HOA. Now, remember, 2 meetings with the city, 20-year plan, 9 people. 9 people. We had a town hall on September 20th at St. Gregory's Church at Mountain and Verdugo. We had over 200 people show up.
And not just that, then they put all these surveys out there where you could say what you didn't like. And overwhelmingly, everyone was against this. And so what is so sad and frustrating is you're saying to this council right now, we don't want this, we don't want this. And because it doesn't match what they want, and then they've got their people that their buddies that want it. But the people that say they want it are not affected by any of the decisions, especially up here in the northern part up here in the foothills. And I just want to be very clear one more time. We are not NIMBYs. We understand the dynamic of the foothills functions differently because we're in the foothills and there's fires in the foothill and there are hills in the foothills and it's not flat. So you can't build like you would build in a flat area. You just can't do it. And when we say that you're destroying the neighborhoods and there's no parking, why shouldn't people that live in these units that are being built for them have the same ability to park their car, because they don't want you to have cars? But now you force it into these neighborhoods and they become cut through neighborhoods. So you've decreased safety for these neighborhoods. You've
Correct.
increased population. No one's walking. Everyone's living in little hamster boxes, and that's not quality of life. Also, you could have density housing so that developers can make some money. And look, I think everybody should be able to make a living and make a profit on their investment. I think that's just fine.
That's right.
But you can't say, especially going to Montrose, we're going to build all this density housing because everyone should be able to enjoy all the shops in Montrose. You won't have shops in Montrose. You won't have anything to enjoy. And then on top of that, what are these massive buildings going to look like 10, 15 years from now that are all subsidized by the state of California?
You made a very good point. You're not going to have shops. This corridor, this Montrose beautiful retail neighborhood, it was built in the 1930s. Okay.
It's old.
So it's approaching 100 years.
Right.
And I've heard our mayor say recently, the Montrose merchants need the housing. And that's absolutely false. That the Montrose merchants need the housing. They absolutely do not need the housing. They don't want the density.
No, they've needed a lot of things along the way, and they're never heard.
That's right. See, so here's to your point. This council, including the two incumbents that are running for re-election, there was before them an agenda item to discuss to remove the CORO, the city-owned residential overlay, remove it from the land use element. They wouldn't do it. And the reason that they wouldn't do it is they said, we want to see the results of the environmental impact report. And my answer to that is this. If you're not going to take the test, then why are you going to study for it? If you're not going to build the parking lots, then why are you going to study it?
And if you're not going to build the parking lots, why would you state publicly, go start a GoFundMe and buy them yourselves?
You're right.
To the entire community. It's.
You're right.
Right? Remember that? And we're all
Yes,
like,
I do.
But they're not for sale. And why are we buying things that we pay, that we own?
That we own.
We own
Why
them.
are we buying from ourselves?
And so I look at this and I'm thinking, you can't afford to do it. And I know the state is breathing down your back, but you've got your numbers, unless you've
Not a
lied
state
somewhere
issue.
about your numbers.
The CORO is not a state issue unless they're in a net loss on the housing element.
But
that's a whole nother story. I think you and I have discussed.
Yeah, this is like the marathon podcast interview because there's so much. And like I said, people get up every day and people are just trying to get through their lives. For most people, it's, I don't have time to understand. I don't want to understand it. It's too expensive for me to live. I'm just going to keep my head down and raise my kids, and please leave me alone. And people should be allowed to be like that. Right. But we're at a point, and we're not even talking about all the pensions that need to be paid.
Let's talk about electricity rates.
Okay, let's talk about power. And let me share something before I let you go off on all the power. We have 60% of our population by 2040 will be 60 years and older. So think about that. The population that is going to be renting these units, not buying, renting, that population, that segment of our population is declining. So we're not building to meet the needs of seniors. And even if we were, our seniors up in the foothills, some of them, I have a client right now, forced to sell because they cannot afford to pay their electric bill. And there's nothing the city goes, oh, we'll do a reduction for seniors. Okay, your $20 discount for seniors, you are driving them out. And now you've got your electric heaters. And listen, when the fires hit sadly, the Eaton Canyon fire, and everyone was losing their power. They couldn't cook. They couldn't do anything, right? I still have a gas water heater and I still have a gas range and I had a gas fireplace. So I was eating and I was showering and I invited friends over. But you want to get rid of gas and now you want to go all electric and the rates are skyrocketing and you're driving seniors out of their homes and having to sell. But then people can't afford to buy them because it's so expensive to live in the city of Glendale.
Right. I had
Okay.
I had an experience. Let me start with the power policy in Glendale, promulgated by the incumbents that are running, along with a couple more, is an epic failure. Epic failure. I was at cruise night last August, and I had a conversation with a teacher who had two adolescent children. Maybe one was 10 years old. I think the daughter was 12. And a young woman, a teacher, a Glendale teacher, she was near tears, telling me that she was going to have to leave Glendale because she could not afford her electric bill.
It happens every day.
We're losing our teachers and our families. GUSD enrollment is down.
Merchants are leaving because they can't afford their rent
So
and their utilities on top of that.
Let me tell you about the power policy. I have been working with the former general manager of Glendale Water and Power now for some time. He's retired in 2025, 4, 5. Anyway, he had a plan in 2022 that he took to the state of California. Grayson, our power plant, was one of the top 5 polluters in the state of California. He had a plan for 5 Wärtsilä German engines. They were gas-burning engines, very efficient. You could turn them on and off quickly, which you typically cannot do with a furnace because you have to bring it offline slowly so that it doesn't pollute the environment. My background, I graduated with an associate's degree in mechanical engineering. I spent 5 years working for Consolidated Edison in New York City, and I worked in a power station. So I know how you have to slowly take it down and then slowly build it back up so you don't pollute the environment and you don't damage the equipment inside this plant. So these engines were state-of-the-art engines where you could turn them on and off very easily. If you need it, you turn them on. If you don't need it, you turn them off. So he went to the state of California and they control the emissions. The South Coast Air Quality Management District controls emissions along, they're part of the California Air Resources Board. And they said you can run those at 100%. Now, we would have had to have probably bought carbon credits, but that's what they said. So one of the incumbents said, we don't want 5 engines. I'm going to paraphrase a lot of this. We don't want 5 engines. We want to knock it down to 3 engines. So in 2022, we had 5 engines. We were going to be over 200 megawatts of power. We were going to be able to sell power to other cities, and we were going to be able to keep our rates static, no movement. We also were only going to spend for 5 engines $493 million, okay, to repower this plant. The delay from 2022 through the end of 23 and into 24 in making the decision, pushing the rest of the council members to reduce from 5 engines down to 3, did a couple of things. The interest rates on the bonds doubled. And because these engines were so popular globally because of their efficiency, the price of this repowering for 3 engines went to $600 million. So we took out debt, over $510 million in debt, with double the interest rates because we delayed because of all the deliberations that were going on from the dais.
I'm going to have a meeting about the meeting to have a meeting.
And here's the worst part. They put a self-imposed cap of 14% of power generation. Self-imposed. Because remember, the state of California said you can run those at 100%, 5 of them. So we imposed 14% on ourselves when we could have run them higher. Do we take the 3 and run it at 100%? Probably not. Okay. We do have an opportunity here. We can go back to California and lift that 14% cap when we go for our operating permit our operating permit scheduled as of right now, we go for it in July. We can lift the 14% cap, giving us some relief.
Why? Let me ask a question. Why did they self-impose a 14% cap? What was the reasoning
Because they
behind it?
didn't want to burn the incumbents along with others, the incumbents who were up for re-election, along with others that were on the council at the time, decided that the 14% was the right number for environmental safety. If the state
But
of
are they
California,
environmental experts? The state.
one of them fancies himself as a non-environmental expert.
So the state says, so you go to the state and the state says you can do something. You do EIRs because you want to see if it makes sense to do something. So now they just, it's interesting how they're picking and choosing and there's no consistency on how decisions are made.
It's an ideology, Robbyn.
Okay.
The city is being run with ideologies in mind. The bicycle lanes, the increase in density because there's a housing crisis. You're in the business of residential real estate. In my view, and I got data to back it up, we don't have a housing crisis. We have an affordable housing crisis. That's
Right.
what we have.
And there is no true affordable housing, and the density projects that are being built are not affordable.
Correct. So going back to the ideology. So you have environmental ideology. Look, we all want clean air, okay? But there needs to be a balance of the pain being inflicted on people, fixed income people, teachers, okay, that are moving out of our city directly because of electric bills and our power policy, okay? That's wrong. That's wrong. So you have power, you have bicycle lanes on the wrong streets, you have bicycle lanes on streets that are major access points to get out in the event of a fire, and you have what we just talked about, the higher density. It's an ideological council at this time. It has to change because it's killing us.
So let me ask you, because we could go on, and we'll do part two. We'll do part two.
Like I said early on, there's a lot to go through.
So much, there's so much. So take this last moment and tell viewers, what is it that you want to do? If you get elected, what is it? Like, what's the priority? How do you speed up the process? Because it seems like process and speed is lacking. What are your top 4 items on your agenda if you can get elected?
Reduce the cost of living from an electricity point of view, and this, okay? Reduce the cost of living. Keep our street and our neighborhood safe by not putting in bicycle lanes as one example to make it unsafe. Work closely with our police department, who does a fantastic job, okay? Work with the fire department to see what their issues are and how we can mitigate those issues, okay? Listen to the people. Engage with the people. We saw what the public can do. I like to say, when the public performs the public outreach, the public responds. One of the things that I will do is I will get out into the public. I will make it known as to what is going on in their neighborhoods. That's what I will do. This is not a campaign about me. This is about the people of Glendale. I'm not running for me. As I said earlier on, I have no aspiration other than to help make Glendale better. Okay? So this is about the people, and we're not engaging enough with the people.
But you are the people. This is what I would like everyone to understand. You are the people because the decisions that they're making are affecting your everyday life, and you are recognizing that. And not everybody has the ability to step up and say, I'm going to run, and I'm going to take all the scrutiny, and I'm going to take all the beatings, and I'm going to take all the back tongue lashings and all of that. You've got the time. You're in a position. You're knowledgeable. You're in a position to do it. And I commend you for taking on that role.
Thank you. And I commend you for being so involved, because you have a full career, you have a business to operate, and we all have to make money, and profit's not a bad word. So I appreciate the opportunity to be on your podcast. If there is a part two, we can dig in deeper on some things.
Part two is when you win. No,
Okay.
I think what we'll do is I think we'll do a part two and we'll focus on just one topic because we went through so much, and I think I would hope that it won't be too late after, because when is the election for city council?
June 2nd, the ballots will drop in early May.
Okay, so I hope that's not too late for you to do some kind of impact on BRT.
Like I said, I'm having conversations with the Burbank City Council, and I'm having conversations with neighborhoods. There needs to be an action started. There really does.
I am
Judiciary, the third branch of government is a judiciary. We need them involved.
I promise it's going to be my last question, but I have to ask this question. There was something that I read, because I read a lot. I'm up at 4 a.m. and I'm reading. That's because it's important for me to understand what's happening with all of this, because that affects my clients when they're buying and selling.
Exactly.
So you have to understand it. It doesn't mean that I'm taking the position one way or the other. These are just the facts. This is what's going to happen. But there was something that I read or listened to that was talking about Burbank did something, Pasadena did something to vitiate some of the effects of BRT and SB 79. And
During my meeting that I had, or the session that I had with the project manager of BRT in Fremont Park, I asked him, because we looked at the map together. Pasadena has no dedicated bus lanes. No. I said, how did that happen? They said they got involved early during the scoping of the environmental review. I said, we didn't do that? No, Glendale didn't do that. Okay. Board member, 20 years, longest serving, wants a legacy. Okay. That's political. And Burbank got, and I don't know the full detail of it, they negotiated and have so both of these cities have cooperative agreements with Metro. We don't.
what is
We're going in
cooperating? What is a
a cooperative agreement, for example, a cooperative agreement with Metro will take care of costs associated. One of the items will take care of costs associated with review of plans and coordinating the effort of construction. We don't have one of those agreements.
So how does Glendale think they're going to be able to afford any of this project?
I don't know. That's a good question for Aaron Najarian and the rest of the council
And the
incumbents.
But I also think that Pasadena, because there was a huge coalition up here in the foothills that fought that 710 extension. That was, I don't know how long. People that they still live up here. And I want to say that was a 10 or 15-year battle to stop that 710 freeway going through to Long Beach. And I think that Pasadena learned something from that. And they've got some light rail over there. I don't know the budget in Pasadena, but when you go to Pasadena, there's a different, they're getting all of the density bonus and all of that. But there's two things I noticed. I traveled to North Carolina a lot, especially Cary. And Cary has gone from a little town like Montrose with a different lay of the land. But the thing that they're doing different in building all of these big apartment buildings is they're building parking structures. So they have their apartments that have parking, enough parking, and then they've created parking structures so that you can still enjoy all of the retail and the beautiful perks that they're adding around. And I don't know, okay, yeah, they get snow, they get some weather, but we're California. We have this great weather, and we're not going to, and we have hills. We're not going to be, as much as it sounds great to get on a bike and be able to go everywhere, if your population's by 2040, 60% is over 60, they're not getting on bikes.
No, they're not. And it's not well thought out. That's one of the biggest issues.
It's such a detriment to California. California is such a, this whole Foothill Valley is so beautiful. And I get that people want to live up here, and I would love for everyone to live in beautiful places. But it's not practical. And I'm just wondering why, if you took all that money, couldn't you build new towns and new areas?
Well, yes.
That incorporates all these wonderful amenities? I just don't understand it.
that's one of the consequences. These inverse consequences from these policy decisions can be enormous. And like the repowering of Grayson, it's enormous consequences associated with that policy.
Well,
It's a problem.
and
The
you
North
notice
Grand
that they're
Boulevard.
not doing these big developments up in wine country where there's plenty of land.
Right.
It's just, I know that was a snarky remark. I'm
One
gonna
of
be
one of
more
the
deep
one of
in.
the incumbents on the podcast last September and said that Glendale is a smaller city than Los Angeles, of course.
Wait, it's
And
a
it's
smaller city in what?
a smaller city than Los Angeles, of course.
Right.
3.9 million people in Los Angeles, 188,000 in Glendale. And what he said was, it's easier to experiment with smaller cities. Are we an experiment now?
I'm just going to keep my mouth shut on the comment that almost flew out of my mouth about that. But you experiment on rats, right?
So why we're experimenting at the risk of losing people?
Because it doesn't affect that particular. I don't know who you're talking
Right.
about, and that's fine. We don't need to name names, but it's okay to experiment if it's not going to affect you. And it's sad because there are people that love this community. And sure, some of them want to see progress, but good progress. And
But progress of 450,000 people over the next 20 years, that's not progress. That's going to be detrimental to all of us.
Well, and not when your population is declining. This
Right.
might be the core problem. Maybe there's just an inability to do basic math.
A lot of the units that are getting built, and I know we're going off track here, but
I know.
we're losing families. A lot of the units that are being built,
Yes.
there's 700 square foot, 1-bedroom units.
Yes.
You can't raise a family.
But listen, if you look at when they did a presentation, and I know we're going over and we can do edits or whatever, but I think this is really important information. When there was a meeting about the project at Briggs and Foothill, 87 units, I believe. And a majority of them are 1-bedrooms. But if you look at how the state allocates living square footage, you have to understand that a 1-bedroom is allocated for 4 people. If you look at how they do, when they do these 100% affordable units, 1 bedroom is for 4 people. 2 bedrooms is for 6 to 8 people.
That's nuts.
So if you took an average, and I told you 458 units all across the foothills, and you just took an average and you said, okay, they're going to take 458 units and you put 4 people in 448 units just on Foothill Boulevard. Do the math.
Right.
You can barely get up and down Foothill after 10 o'clock. Up to 10 o'clock, you can do it after rush hour, which is normal for any town. But after 3 o'clock, you now need to tag on an extra 15 to 20 minutes. It's no longer 15 minutes to get to Pasadena. It's 25, 30 minutes to get from La Crescenta.
And what does that do to the environment? More consequence.
And that's what's interesting. So now you have cars idling longer in traffic. And I drove down, I'm all over the town. And the only time I see people on bikes in the bike lanes that do exist is some groups over the weekend.
Right.
And they put bike lanes on Santa Carlotta. That's a strip above Foothill, if you don't know Santa Carlotta, that goes from Pennsylvania to Lowell. And they put bike lanes. And I was driving down there at 6:45 this morning, and the walkers love the bike lanes. It was great for them, but we have sidewalks there. And
Right.
so it's funny how you're installing more sidewalk on La Crescenta Avenue because people want to walk, but you want bike lanes. And I'm like, but if you talk to people that really cycle, like one of my clients is an avid cyclist, travels, tours, everything. And I said, so are you excited about the bike lane on La Crescenta Avenue? He goes, are you out of your mind? Do you think I want to die? No one wants to ride against a car that's going 40, 50 miles an hour down La Crescenta Avenue.
So you don't go on that street. That's the bottom line. You don't go on that street.
No, and you know where the cars are going to go now? The cars are going to go through Sport Heights.
And they're already experiencing it because I've talked to them when I was door knocking. When I was canvassing, this construction was going on. They were already getting cut through traffic.
Yeah.
There's a term I used in my retail years and when I was opening stores for Leslie's. called psychographic. It's a subset of demographic. It's how people think. So, for example, in California, the pool customers would have a service person come and clean their pool. Southern California, people didn't clean their own pools. You go to Dallas, Texas, and it's a Saturday morning event for dad and the kids to clean the pool for a Saturday afternoon pool party with the children. They do it. They do the work. So there's a psychographic. Trying to change the psychographic of Southern California people and trying to force them onto bicycles or onto mass transit doesn't work. It doesn't work. What has to happen is over a generation, these things, this change could and should occur. Okay. But you don't force it down people's throats.
But
You just don't do that because it's not going to work.
You're not building the infrastructure for it.
That's a whole nother topic, Robbyn. That's a whole nother.
It's okay. So our next follow-up is going to be Verdugo Boulevard. There's that whole project that we didn't even touch on. I want to go into more detail about the Verdugo Wash project. That will blow people's minds what they want to do there, especially if you go there on a heavy rain day. That would be an interesting, that's another experiment, right?
The fire danger with that.
The fire
again,
danger,
another topic.
And so you look at that. If you want to look, I couldn't live in Valencia. It's not my cup of tea. I love the eclecticness of the foothills. I think it's beautiful. But if I were to have a second chance and I started a family all over, I would live in Valencia because that whole bike path, you're never on the street. It was the first.
It's a master plan community.
It's a master plan community designed by masters. And here's the thing. And I don't know if it still is, but at some point it was the best master plan community across the country because
I believe that.
All of your bike lanes are through tunnels and completely protected, never touching a street. Go to Valencia and look at the traffic in Valencia. And just think if they had all those bike lanes, because it pushed all of the people, and they're healthier, and it's almost, I feel like they're trying to turn Glendale into Valencia, and you can't do it.
No, you can't.
You can't do it. What are you going to do? Tunnel everywhere, and you can't. If you took away main streets in Valencia, it wouldn't work.
So let me ask you a question. You mentioned like you would be interested in having an event for the campaign.
Hold on one second. Let me close out this podcast, and then we'll talk about our future together. So I want to thank you for being on my podcast. I'm just saying we had a lot to talk about. And we did get to the point, sometimes it took us a long time, but I really enjoyed the time. I have no idea how much time we spent together, but I really appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I appreciate it as well.
Absolutely. I'm Robbyn Battles, and I'm just saying, I want to thank you for listening. I hope you'll come back for future episodes, and be sure to like, share, and follow. I'm just saying, let's get to the point. I'm Robbyn Battles.